are standing in front of the horrors of Blumhouse. This is our third compilation Blumhouse house that we've done at Horror Nights. Although we started working with Blumhouse, gosh, I think back to 2013, the first time we did Insidious. So we've had a long relationship working with Jason Blum and his company. A couple things that are different this time around. In the previous two Horrors of Blumhouse experiences we created, we always set it in a movie theater, and it was always a Horrors of Blumhouse film festival. The reason we changed it this year is the location. We moved from, we used to be, I think it was Parisian Courtyard, then I think once it was downstairs on the back lot. But this year, as we were shuffling the slate around and figuring where we were going to put things, we decided to put it here in the Waterworld location. And this has this. It has this big permanent shade structure. So we couldn't build the facade that we'd built before, but that gave us an opportunity to kind of create something new. He's from the UK,
so, literally
his joke. My ancestral estate is in Wales. He goes, the facade's not the movie theater's not going to fit. And I go, yeah, we're going to have to come up with something else. He goes, why don't we do a video store? And he was joking. And I was like, that's brilliant. For a couple of reasons. He's from the UK. Collaborated with our counterpart video stores from the time I was in high school till, mom classic, mom and pop video Universal store, all through high school, all through college. I think even when I started Universal, I still worked there on the weekends because I did the ordering for the whole store and everything from the time I was like 17. Or 16 even. But what I liked about it was, in recent years, like these pop-up old school, mom and pop video stores have been kind of a thing, Slashback, video. Yeah, Blockbuster. Like, isn't there just one left?
I went to it last
year. I was telling a group of media the other day I'm like, there's people that make pilgrimages just to go to this one Blockbuster, Yeah. And then, Netflix, when they launched, I think it was Fear Street Trilogy, they created a video store, and I just thought that was really cool. So the idea here is that this is an abandoned strip mall that's about to be torn down. So there's a couple things still missing out front. There's going to be all the condemned signage. This is going to be all tagged with graffiti, trash. But on this particular night, suddenly this video store pops up, and you'll notice that there's no name on the video store. It's actually there. It's just invisible. It's all done with invisible blacklight paint because we wanted to create this kind of faux neon, hellish looking neon sign. So this is Blumhouse Video, and it's your horror movie HQ. It's only open one night a year. It only rents horror movies, and it only rents two particular horror movies. It only rents Freaky and Black Phone, and that's one of the last things we have to do too, is finish dressing these windows. Our prop crew is busily making tons of VHS tapes with, we actually went into the Universal system. I'm like, do we still have packaging for VHS tapes? Which you don't, of course, but of course you still have DVDs. So they're recreating the packaging so they can make VHS tapes of Freaky and Black Phone and have it in the windows. The other thing that's different this time around, in the previous ones, we did 3 movies at a time. We decided to just do 2 this time, and it really has to do with the content of these 2 particular movies. When I saw Freaky, I just loved it. I thought Freaky was great. I don't know if everybody's seen it or not, but what a fun horror movie, combining that idea of Freaky Friday with a horror movie. I just thought it was a heck of a lot of fun. And then when I got to screen Blumhouse before it came out, I'm sorry, Blumhouse. I keep saying Blumhouse for Black Phone. Black Phone before it came out. I thought that also had a lot of content to mine. So we decided just to focus on 2 movies. The idea with the video store is that it's pretty much like a portal to hell. It's there's going to be red smoke and eerie light coming through here. And then once you step through the video store, you're in the world of these 2 particular movies. And we go from there. So that's the main changes we did this go around with Horrors of Blumhouse. Like our previous houses, we always set it up with a title card for the movie we're dealing with, which I'll show you when we step on.
Are pictures okay of this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is aside from the fact that it's it's not in show lighting. What's going to happen here? This is our title card that tells you, okay, we're starting with Freaky. There's a special effect associated with the Ladola dagger, which is its eye starts to glow red during the narration. So we're picking snippets of dialogue from the film. This is the Spanish teacher, I believe, when she's explaining what this dagger is and the curse that it has on it. And part of the challenge with Freaky really is, it's a story is kind of complicated to explain in the context of a haunted house. So as we go through it, I'll show you how we had to kind of come up with visual ways to tell this switching body story and the curse and all that. The other thing I really liked, I thought was very amusing and freaky, was the use of title cards for, what is it? It's Wednesday the 11th, Thursday the 12th, and then finally Friday the 13th. So after you see this, you see a title card for the first day, and then we take you into the experience.
Did you ever consider doing the opposite order, or did you want to start with like
I want to start with the comedic one, because by the time you get Black Phone, you couldn't take two films that are diametrically opposed in tone. Freaky is a comedy horror film, and Black Phone is just dark. So we wanted to end with a dark one. Going through Freaky, of course, there's that opening sequence which plays exactly like a slasher movie. It could be Friday the 13th. So you're in the house. The Blissfield butcher comes in, smashes this case, takes the Ladola dagger, takes one of the ceremonial masks off the wall, and starts his killing spree with all these teenagers. So on the front end of the house, we just wanted to bam, 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 hammer you with the butcher. So there's a hidden door you can see in daylight where that is. It's right behind you, this panel right here. This whole panel opens. Let's wait. Locked it from behind. There we go. That opens on. Put the latch on it on the back.
Wow.
So this whole panel opens. The butcher attacks you, and then you see this poor girl impaled to the wall. So it's thunder and lightning, just like it is in the movie, and then through this, it's not really what it looks like. The butcher crashes through and comes at you a second time.
That's a nice dummy.
Yeah, it's really good. Sounds like an offhanded compliment. That's a nice dummy. But I guess, yeah, she is a dummy. Yeah. I think the blue tape is telling, this is all prop, you'll see prop crew stuff all over this house. This is them telling them, it's locked. Secure it. The last thing we do, I should mention, the one thing you won't see in here is any blood. And that's because that's the very last thing our props and dressing crew does, because it makes such a horrible mess. We've, over the years, through trial and error, they've got all their own little recipes for blood, depending on what kind of blood it is. If it's what we would call scenic blood that's going to go on the walls, and that's one formula they make. If it's going to be blood that goes on the ground, they pour these huge puddles of blood, and when they dry, they cut them out and they just bring them in here and place them. So they kind of do all that work in our offsite facility. And it's really weird when it goes on. It's like bright pink, like bubble gum. And then when it dries, it looks all slick and looks like real blood, wet. So they'll do that like at the last moment before we open. They have a lot of it to do, actually, because when you get into this, as you get further along, and even in this hallway, actually they have to do blood and wine in the next scene, because it's the kid with the where they're in the wine cellar, and he takes that wine bottle, just shoves it down his throat. When we looked at that scene, and I'll show you, it's around the corner, we were like, well, this isn't really good for an actor. Imagine some kid, here, hold that, hold that for 7 hours. So we knew it needed to be an effect of some kind, and that's one thing across the board that we're really trying to step up this year. We're trying to step things up in a number of ways. Like last year was, it was kind of surreal for us because we had 2020, we had a whole event. Some of it was built, and then it was canceled, as we all know. Everything had to be torn down. And then going into 21, the whole time we were just kind of on pins and needles. We didn't know whether we were going to have an event or not. This year, it's kind of like, we're just like kind of going mad. We're just like, go, let's go, live life to the fullest. So we're really trying to step it up on the scenic front, which you'll see when we get down to monsters too. That gorgeous, house and facade that we've created down there. But we really wanted to try to take a big leap with our effects. So we have a new effects person this year, and we also tapped into our own internal tech services department. We have a huge department that maintains this theme park. Not just like everything from plumbing to electrical. We have every trade within this division of Universal called Technical Services that services the theme park. But we also have highly skilled mechanical engineers, and we have people that deal with animatronics that are always dealing with, like, say, the Jurassic World dinosaurs. And they actually came to us, a whole group of them this year, a bunch of engineers, and they were all Horror Nights fans. And they were like, we want to make stuff for Horror Nights. And we were like, really? Okay, I thought you guys were busy, just taking care of the dinosaurs and all that. But we tapped into them this year, and we tasked them with a whole bunch of little engineering challenges, which I'll show you one big one in this house. But we also worked with them on this wine bottle thing, and we were like, okay, we want it to be like, freaking out. But then we want to do this effect where you hear that horrible gurgling sound, and then you hear this horrendous vomiting sound, and we want to make it feel like we sprayed you with, I guess, blood and wine, because that would be what's down there. And originally we had like a performer controlling that from behind the set, and they're like, oh no, let's do this with sensors and IR, and we're like, oh, okay, we haven't really done that in Horror Nights before. We do that stuff in rides. So when you go around the corner, I'll just show you guys real quick. Sensor along here. My wine model. So like, if you were there and you just tripped that sensor, of course it's turned off right now. This causes a horrendous sound effect to happen, and then a huge blast of compressed air and water, which is hidden. There's a little nozzle down there. So the idea is that he's just going to puke all over you. Good times.
Would these paintings have been pre-existing?
It's probably a couple of different things. We have an offsite facility that's kind of like a giant prop house. Like, part of it is just exactly like if you went to the lower lot and went to the property department. There's a room of just like clocks, and then there's a whole area just of paintings and paintings and paintings. Some they acquire, and sometimes if it's something really specific, then we have to recreate it, clear it, to be able to use it and put it in. Some things we make ourselves, our prop folks make ourselves. Like when we get down to monsters, there's a ton of historical stuff down there that I researched, and then they went and found and purchased the license for. And then there's a whole lot of things they created as well, which I'll show you guys when we're down there. That one's a good example of all the stuff that they create. This most likely existed in our prop department.
Okay. Is this the mansion at the beginning of the
Yeah,
film? Okay.
yeah, exactly. And then you keep going down the same hallway, and you run into the girl who was murdered, death by toilet, I guess. Where he slams the toilet lid on her head multiple times. And if you want to get an idea of like the tools we give our performers to amplify their scares, this is a really good idea. If you just peek back here, you can see everything our performer has. He has a monitor, you can see the guest coming. He has his audio lighting trigger, so he can activate his own point source sound effect and his own lighting cue. So he can time his scares. So he just comes around the corner, with the Ladola dagger. So up to this point, we've only walked through like a hallway and a half, and you've had 3 hits from the butcher already. And then we're going to take you to the next day. Let me check one thing. Yeah,
Is that also another scare right there?
No, I'm going to see. Last time I did this on the morning tour yesterday, and it was open. And then I did it on the afternoon one. Oh, they locked it again. Yeah, they locked it from the other side. So what this is, and I'll show you around the corner, but I have to kind of explain it first because we're still in the middle of installing the graphics for this. I mentioned at the beginning, there's some things that are really kind of complicated from a story standpoint, and we have to explain them visually with as minimal amount of dialogue as possible, because that's just the nature of a haunted house. It's a chaotic environment. People are screaming. You have to mostly do your storytelling visually. We wanted to convey in this house the whole switching bodies thing, starting with the night where the butcher attacks Millie at the football stadium, and he stabs her with a Ladola dagger, but then he immediately reacts in pain as if he was stabbed himself, and that's what triggers the curse that causes the body change. So the way we do that, as we go, I'll tell you what it is before we go around, and then I'll explain it when we get there. When you leave this scene, we set up the next day. with the title card, and then it's as if you're walking along the outside of the football stadium with the kind of concrete block look, and then all of that disappears because it's our disappearing room effect that we've used. Well, we used it briefly in Haunting of Hill House last year to kind of change the house back and forth. I think we started doing that in Freddy vs. Jason maybe years ago. But in this case, we want all those walls to disappear, and then there's a set back here that the guests don't actually go into, but the performers are in. And it's that Aztec temple, and Millie's in her mascot costume with that goofy, beaver head. And the butcher stabs her with the Ladola dagger and then immediately reacts in pain as if he was stabbed himself. So there's a whole set back here, which is locked, of course. But around the corner, I'll explain how it happens.
The sound designs are incredible.
So everywhere you see this, that's going to be the walls. Prints up, and they're all things that we went, nope. That you kind of get an idea of the process of how we do this. I guess if you peek through that little hole right there, you'll see a whole big huge diorama of the stormy sky back there, and a bit of the Aztec temple. It's like a little sneak peek.
Are you guys looking for a ton of tall actors, or are you putting lifts on the costumes?
Yeah, trying to get. I think I met Vince years ago. Actually, you know where I met Vince Vaughn? It's pretty trippy. I created the little moment that's on the studio tour of Norman. Where he's at the Bates Motel and he comes out with the body and all that whole routine. I created that. God, it was right after the Backlot fire. It was like immediately after that.
Oh wait, something like that.
Yeah, and like the first couple days we were doing it, I was just kind of hanging out there watching the actors perform, making sure it all worked. And then I kind of looked, and up the hill I was like, somebody's up there. It was Vince Vaughn. And he was just hanging out, and he was just like watching the Normans. And I was like, hey, how you doing? And he's tall. Yeah, he's got to be at least 6'4", maybe?
Because he played Norman.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, when was that remake? Maybe he was doing research.
I think 99.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It was earlier. But yeah, he was just hanging out there watching the Normans one day. He must have been filming on the lot. But yeah, we're trying to cast as well as we can, people that are taller. And we're also trying to cast people that have a general resemblance, because a lot of the times he's wearing that butcher mask. But in a couple of scenes he's not, and he's lip syncing the track. So yeah, we did a pretty good job. I've seen the candidates that they selected. So
cool.
Yeah, casting's always interesting to see, because it's just we have maybe like 300 or more veterans that come back every single year. There's still people in the cast from 2006. I think that's down to 3 now.
Wow.
But we have a lot of people who come back year after year after year that are just part of like our family of characters that work this event. But then there's a whole lot of new people that come in every year. So you create these roles and then hope that they walk through the door and you can cast it. So you kind of see the process of how we get to doing this. What we do is once we get the scenic, like we would have photographed this wall and then given it to our graphic designer, so you can see this print's way too blue, this print's way too green. This print's close, but not quite the right match. So that's why this isn't up yet, because we're still going through that process of trying to match the gray exactly to the concrete block. So under show lighting, like this will all just look like a wall, and then the whole thing disappears, and you see that little scene with the Aztec temple and the butcher trying to kill Millie. And then here's another challenge. This is another one that was difficult to figure out. We wanted to do that switching bodies moment. That's also hard to do without a lot of dialogue. So we came up with an idea, and it was inspired by probably a 2-second or even maybe 1 second shot in a montage in the film. Right after Millie's attacked by the butcher, she goes home, she takes a bubble bath, and then she goes to bed and she has a nightmare. And she's kind of tossing and turning in bed, and they do this montage of kind of like what she's dreaming about in her nightmare. And just for like a second or two, there's a shot of Millie's bed in the butcher's lair, and then it changes. So I thought, that might be a cool way to do the switching bodies thing. So we're going to walk in and enter part of Millie's bedroom, but there's one object that shouldn't be there. Oh my God, it's arrived. Where's something? It's here. Jose. I'm waiting for that one. So you walk in, it's Millie's bedroom with the string lighting, except there's that weird thing sitting on her wicker clothes basket. We use scent in this scene and in a lot of scenes in mazes. There's a little scent cannon up there. And the scent I was asking for, I said I want it to smell like Bed Bath & Beyond or Claire's Boutique. It's just something that screams, teenage girl's bedroom. And then there's another scent cannon in this scene that's like mildew and, nasty smelling. So you walk through this transition and then you enter the butcher's lair, but Millie's bed is in it. Look, shut up. Yeah. I'm not going in there until it's done. So what happens is Millie's tossing and turning in her bed. All of a sudden her alarm clock goes off. At the same time we bleed through this 50-50 mirror and we see the butcher standing in here. And then she wakes up with a start. He comes out as if he's going to scare us. They look at each other. They scream. And then he just kind of, freaks out and goes back in, because he's not really the serial killer now. Now he's Millie. She wakes up and is like, what body I'm in? And it's just it's just a loop that's going to repeat over and over and over again. And it's just, there's nobody really trying to scare you in this scene. It's just trying to pay off the comedy aspects of freaky. And then we go to the next day. Friday the 13th. Yeah. There's Scout. Like bullets and down and if it's somebody like a girl in a bed or something, usually we'll put them in those scenes. There's also video surveillance throughout the entire house, and there's somebody real time watching all of that, and there's multiple layers. Yeah. So now you're back in high school.
Nightmare.
We were joking the other night. We were in here, and I'm like, does anybody remember their high school locker combination?
No.
And there was like some people totally remember it, and some people don't remember it all. Hey, do you need anything, brother?
No, you're good now, but about 5 minutes we're going to do the internet inspection.
Oh!
But you're good for a while.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll keep going.
If you need minutes, we'll kind of...
all right, cool.
take it slow.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah.
Millie's the scare, but now she's the butcher in Millie's body, and she's wearing that leather jacket like she does in the film, and she comes out with a knife to scare you. But we wanted to, again, work in the comedy, so we always work with our actors on their attack and their retreat when they go back into their hide. So on her attack, she comes out with a knife, and then she retreats. She goes, I can't wait to kill you. I can't wait to kill you. And then she's out. And then we get to the wood show.
There we go. There it is.
No, I know Tony really well. I've worked with Tony many times in the past. I filmed with Tony. I filmed with Chucky with Tony. So we've known each other for years. So yeah, I did definitely consulted with Tony. And like the Ladola dagger that you see in the house, that's off the screen. That's the mold from the film and everything.
This is awesome.
Yeah, this is, remember I mentioned mechanical engineering at the beginning? So we wanted to create an effect where Millie could take the body, push it through the saw blade, which is still being installed, and have it split and splay open.
That's beautiful.
So this is all just mechanical, mechanical practical effect.
It's so cool.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We're trying to step up all this. We've always done, we do a lot of practical effects because that's just the nature of what we do. So trying to take it to the next level this year. We've got some outrageous science project. Like when you get to the weekend house, you'll see it. There's some effects in there that we were like had no idea how we were going to do them, and it's a total science project every time.
What's an Easter egg on here? I'm sure there's one.
Oh yeah, there's one coming up in Black Phone that my prop crew played an evil trick on me. This is actually I go through about 20,000 pictures on this film, I think, and then I pulled all the pictures of all the signage in the class and stuff, and had them recreated. Really, so like this is not a game. These tools are not toys. Your limbs are not puzzle pieces. That's all right out of the film. So we just tried to recreate the film as best as possible, even down to they had to buy all those bird houses because there's a bunch of bird. Because what would you make in woodshop? You make stupid stuff. You make bird houses, and, coat holders, and things like that. At least I did.
It's like bird dirt mom would be offended.
So yeah, so this of course has a massive compressed air and water spritz, and then she has a screwdriver that she can pick up because she stabs them in the
Oh, so that's the normal position. So it's more of a pullback at the
No,
point.
it's a push.
Oh, it's a push.
Yeah, so when you come in, she hits her trigger and then goes through the blade.
That's pretty sweet.
Yep. So cool. And then we take you to the kind of final confrontation in Freaky. Jocks get their comeuppance. Bad way to go, worst way to go, even worse.
Did you work with a different dummy company this year?
I don't. You know what? I'm not even sure with our props department. I mean, we acquire so much stuff. We have so many bodies. It's like I remember when I first started doing horror nights. One night I was going by the loading dock, which is by Walter Street there. And somebody had shipped a bunch of bodies, and somebody had opened them and they'd left them there. And I was working late, like always. Like that's why I always look like this doing horror nights. And it was like midnight or something. I was like, oh my God, it was like I think it was one of the first years we were doing Texas. So it was probably 08 or 07. And I was like, oh my God, they just left these bodies here, you know? And I was like, we can't have this because, like, imagine in the morning, like, all the employees coming to work and there's just people sawed in half and dead bodies everywhere. So it was with Chris, my art director, and I'm like, Chris, you gotta take these to the maze and lock them up or something. You know, somebody's gonna mess with this. So we had my car and the hood up. We were loading dead bodies in the back of the car, and we have police on. You know, we have a substation on property, and this black and white went driving by, and then I was like, looked at Chris, I'm like, he's gonna be back. And then lights on, sirens, zipping around, gets out of the car. You know, what's going on? And I'm like, movie studio. You're new, aren't you? He really thought I had like all these. They look, a lot of times they look for real. It freaked him out. So this is the butcher, unmasked, Millie in the butcher's body, and she's doing that scene from the end of the film, I want my body back! And then Millie comes through the curtain with a chainsaw and she says, come and get it. And then this is kind of the last scene in Freaky, but as soon as you turn the corner, there's one more Millie hit with the chainsaw, just why not? And then we transition into Black Fog. Yeah, there's an embarrassing Easter egg. I got this weird email from my prop crew, and they were like, hey, do you have pictures of yourself when you were like 12 or 10? And I was like, well, I do back in Ireland, but here, you know, I just have like a few here in LA. And so I sent them a few pictures, and somehow a picture of me as an altar boy from the 70s ended up as a lost kid on all these posters. So this is our title card setup for Black Phone. The only thing missing is there's a massive graphic that goes over here that's printed on 4-way stretch material with a hidden slit in it. So we saw the Freaky title card. So what we're trying to do is kind of condition our guests. Okay, oh, it's the title card. Nobody's going to scare us. And then the grabber comes bursting out of the film poster and tries to grab you. Quite literally tries to grab you. And then we take you into the grabber's house. Yeah, I took a lot of pictures of that film. We had to redo that whole yeah, weird brother. Yeah, it's kind of a mess. So with the grabber, what we wanted to do, because he has that that mask that changes, we thought that was such a cool thing in the film, how it changes with his moods. So we had our makeup artist create masks with removable pieces, just like what they did in the film. So every time you see the grabber, he's got a different, mask on. This is the first scare. He comes from around the corner, but as you're coming into the living room, you're hearing the doorbell and you're hearing his dog Samson going crazy, and the brother trying to calm the dog down. This is right when the police arrive and they're trying to ask him questions, and then the grabber comes around the corner with his hunting knife and drives you further into the house. This scene was like in the film. This is one of the creepiest for me. There's that moment in the film where Finney's talking to one of the boys, and he's going to try to escape, and he goes, "Don't go upstairs." He's on the other side of the door. He's waiting for you. So we wanted to do that scene. So we went to our actors that we cast in this role, and we're like, well, how do you feel about going shirtless? Because that's one of the things that makes that scene really creepy. Is just sitting there without a shirt, with his shirt unbuttoned, and he's got the leather belt in his hand, and he's asleep, and he's just, passed out. So that's what's going on in the scene. The grabber's fallen asleep. He's got the belt in his hand, and then he's going to have that little foot trigger. We'll work it over here and hide it for him, so that he can suddenly wake up and try to whack you with the belt. And then we need to get you to the basement. Obviously, in the basement, in the movie, they go down the stairs. You can't go downstairs, obviously, in a haunted house. So we wanted to take you in that transition to the basement, but we wanted to give you an extra surprise along the way. And this is kind of another example. I talked about my art director is really trying to step it up with Scenic. We don't typically do floors, but we're doing it in several places this year, because most of the time your focus is like, where's the scare, where's the scare? But this had a really distinct, kind of parquet floor pattern, so we do the floor all the way through the basement section. And then Samson, his dog, comes busting through here. This is going to be like a HVAC vent that's broken, and attacks you. So this is totally American Werewolf in London, the way we did that, or the werewolf in Universal Monsters. But he's making Samson, and it'll be a puppeted effect, and the jaws can open and close. So as you're going through, you can imagine this curtain being closed, and as soon as you step through here, rah, 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 this dog tries to bite you. So that ought to make you jump. And then we finally arrive at the basement. There's his dead brother who's been hit in the head with an axe. Finney's on the bed, the phone's ringing. We hear Finney say, "It's for you." And then the grabber attacks us from back where you're standing with the axe.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And then this would be what we call in Horror Nights the final scare. And then sometimes, we do the final scare, and then we do maybe like a final scare. In the case of Black Phone, we do the final scare, then we do the final scare, then we do the final scare, and then we do the final scare. You can pass through, it's all right. If you need to get through, no problem. I know you guys got work to do. So as you leave here, you hear the grabber's voice saying, "If you want to get out of here, you have to go through me." And it's almost like he's talking to you, our guests. Because if you want to get out of here, you got to get through the grabber. And there's 3 grabbers, all with axes in the last stretch. Every time you see him, the face changes. And that's the final gauntlet to get you out of here.
Are there going to be items here where that tape is, or what are these tapes denoting?
Yeah, there's his little tray down there with his food. So they're still putting some of the set dressing in. He always brings them like eggs and 7-Up or something. It's weird.
In the case of a maze like this where you're doing 2 movies, do you ever get halfway through the project and be like, gosh, I wish I had a full maze for...
Yeah, I did it. Yeah, honestly, Freaky, yeah. I started with Freaky, and I just did like a bullet point kind of like layout, and then I went, geez, that's a whole maze. I just did a whole maze. Because there was so much stuff in Freaky to mine, location-wise. There was a lot of cool different locations. There's that whole rave thing. There's that whole blacklight thing. Yeah. So there's some scenes that I had in one version that didn't make it into the final version. And it was because we needed to allow space for Black Phone as well. Yeah.
Do you think that Freaky was a little bit easier to translate to a maze, or do you think it was harder than Black Phone? Which one did you...
I think Black Phone primarily takes place in the basement, so that's pretty obvious. Okay, you're going to get into the house, you're going to get to the basement. So from a what to do with it standpoint, it was pretty obvious. Freaky, it was probably more challenging because of the comedy and because of figuring out how we wanted to do this, communicate the switching body thing. Yeah. That was a big difference. Yeah. All right, and then it's just butcher. No, you don't. Grabber. I always get grabber and butcher confused. Grabber on the way out, and you can see where the scares are. I think what we'll probably do is I'll open this up so you guys can get out. I think we're doing Universal Monsters, right? Yeah. So I think I'll have Lindsay take you to Monsters. I'll go see if I can figure out whose parking space I stole in the middle of the night with my golf cart and meet you down there. Cool. Because obviously, stand up at the landing of the Starway and photograph this. But it's fun to watch them as this evolved because they're like, it has to be done. And then we'd add, the crane arm and the sacks, and we're like, oh, it has to be done now. Then we'd add, more stuff, and it just kept going and going.
Are those intended to be like faces almost up there? Because it kind of looks like a little bit of a creepy smiley face.
Yeah, no, it actually isn't. That's probably just a happy accident. This is actually, when I was doing research on this house, I found this building. This is a real building. It's from the Limehouse district of London along the Thames. Like this takes place in kind of late Victorian London. And at that era, London, particularly the Thames and the area around the docks, was like Amazon, basically. It was every good that was going anywhere in the world came and passed through those ports. And the reason we kind of selected this as the facade and London as the setting is because it's already kind of in the story of these films. Like Dracula, the 1931 film with with Bela Lugosi. After he meets Renfield and they enact their real estate transaction in Transylvania, the action all moves to London. He gets on the ship with Renfield and comes to London. Same thing with The Mummy. One of the very first shots in the 1932 Mummy film is a shot of the base camp. Can't compete with that. You're kidding me. Kidding me. Really. Can you turn? We're doing media, man. Can you turn it off? Thank you. I totally lost my train of thought.
First thing, Mummy.
Thank you.
Mummy. First shot.
Thank you. One of the first shots of The Mummy is they show the archaeological base camp, and it's being sponsored by the British Museum. And back in those days, England took everything from all around the world, and they brought them to London. And if you ever go through the British Museum, you'll see the treasures of pretty much the whole world. So that kind of gave us this idea. Oh, okay. So if they were doing an expedition in London, most likely they would or in Egypt, they would most likely try to bring what they found back to London. And then lastly, it's the Wolfman himself. He's from the UK because his ancestral estate is in Wales. So we wanted to bring these three characters together. We needed a reason to bring them together. And what we decided was the common thread between these three characters was the idea of curses. All three of these characters are cursed in different ways. The Mummy is quite literally cursed when he is caught in the temple with the princess and put to death in that horrible way where he's mummified alive and buried in his sarcophagus. This curse is placed upon his very tomb in his sarcophagus. Dracula gets to live forever, but he can't go out in the daylight. So imagine how productive Dracula would be if he could feed day and night. And then the Wolfman is cursed by the cycles of the moon, and every time the moon is full, he turns into this horrible beast and kills people. So they're all searching for some way to end this curse. And how we connected it to Egypt is, in recent years, Egyptologists have discovered that Anubis, which is the jackal-headed figure you always see of he's man, but he's got a dog's head. They realized that was improperly translated, that he isn't actually a dog-headed deity, he is a wolf-headed deity. And that made us go, oh, he's a wolf and a man. That's interesting. So I collaborated with our counterpart, my colleagues in Orlando on this, because we were both going to be doing a Universal Monsters house. We both agreed early on that it was going to be Mummy, Wolfman, and Dracula. And we had totally different opinions on what the setting should be. Charles Gray and Mike Aiello from Orlando were like, oh, we want to set it in an Egyptian tomb and make it all about the archaeological excavation. And we very much wanted to set it in London. So at a certain point in our meetings, we just kind of went, well, why don't we do that? Why don't we make it a two-part story? You guys tell part one, we'll tell part two, and they can stand alone on their own. But if anybody wants to go from Orlando to Hollywood or vice versa, they can kind of see two totally different stories, but the same characters and the same overall arching plot. And that's what we did. Then we needed an object to focus. Like there's always an object in these mummy movies. It's the scroll of thoth. It's always something that the mummy needs to be resurrected. So we came up with the idea of this burial amulet. We call it the amulet of Amun-Ra, who's pretty much the god of gods, but specifically the god of sun. And his hieroglyph is a sun with a snake coiled around it. So we took that idea. We turned the sun into a fire opal. We took the snake and we kind of uncoiled him from the sun and made him two-headed. And then we set that against scarab beetle wings and made it a burial amulet. And so it's both a costume piece the mummy wears, but it's also a special effect because it has LED technology to make it pulse like his heartbeat. And all of the monsters are after that. And now we've arrived at the shipping and receiving warehouse, which if you notice, there's a very large Easter egg up there. Alucard. Dracula spelled backwards. Dracula's got money. You know, he lives in that big castle in Transylvania. He does that real estate transaction at the very beginning of Dracula. So he owns the shipping warehouse. He shipped his coffin back here, but just through a series of circumstances, right when his coffin arrives, so does the mummy's sarcophagus, and so does the Wolfman, and it's game on. To kind of set up that story, we decided we actually needed a pre-show. So we created our own little video that's going to play while you're waiting in line, and that's going to set up this whole idea of curses and what brings these characters together, the amulet of Amun-Ra. And then we sprinkled Easter eggs throughout the whole thing. There's another one over there. All the symbol of Amun-Ra is stamped on these crates, so that tells you they came from Egypt. And then all the dock workers are dead, so it's just like the boat in Dracula, and some of them have puncture wounds in their neck. So we can get out of the blazing hot sun.
John, can we get a shot of you in front of this?
Yeah, sure. I'll just show you real quick. These guys are covered so that the sun just doesn't beat them up. So there's a whole bunch of dead dock workers out here and puncture wounds in their neck. Here, yeah, let me. This is as good a spot as any. And the seagull has nothing to do with anything. I have a new effects guy this year. His name's Dave Boring, and he's just like on fire about special effects. So one Friday he's like, I'm gonna make an animatronic seagull over the weekend, and I was like, really? Okay. And he's like, I think it would be cool to have him on the dock, and I was like, go for it, and it's probably animatronic might be a little like a stretch. It's an animated figure with servo motors that moves, and its head moves and everything.
I think that counts.
It moves.
Okay.
It's not quite an animatronic. In any case, let's get inside where it's Yeah, so all of the things on the walls here are all historical maps of London from that time of the Thames and Limehouse district.
Oh, nice floor again in here.
Yeah, again, now we decided that we wanted to add flooring to this. And some mazes have ceilings. Just across the board, try to change it up. If you've been to Horror Nights, and if you've been to any of our Universal Monster mazes, or if you've been to other, probably Pandora's Box, I think this boy was probably in there too. You've seen like this Anubis statue probably multiple times. But what we have in our production facility off-site is we have all of these statues and different props and dressing from Steve Summers' movies, the Mummy movies, Mummy Returns, the Mummy from '99. I worked with Steve when we did the Mummy ride in 2004. So they gave us all this stuff after the movie wrapped because it was just going to be destroyed. Because back when they were making the Mummy movies, we weren't quite set up the way we are now, where there's an archive where hero props always go to the archive, but then there's all this stuff left over from movies that usually gets sold or dispensed with in some manner. But we went, yeah, we'll take the statues. So the vast majority of these have never been used for Horror Nights because they're just too big. We just don't have room for them. But this time, last year around this time, I was in our warehouse and I was like, oh yeah, we have all these statues. And I was like, I'm definitely going to write something for this year that uses these. So that meant we actually had to bring some of them in before we even built the walls because they were so big. So it was a fun opportunity. Oh look, free cobwebs. This one comes with like free unless they actually did. No, they didn't do our cobwebs yet. I can tell that's one of the last things they do. So he's been sitting on a shelf for a while in the prop warehouse. So as you come into this is like where if you arrived with your boat, you need to check in with your paperwork. You hear that very iconic laugh, and then you hear somebody say, "Master, we here," and that's Renfield. So as you're coming through this scene, suddenly Renfield appears in this mirror laughing, or in this window laughing, and as you turn the corner, he goes and slams the bang window. And he's the first character you encounter, and then you go into the holding room, which is the big scene with all the statues. The scale steps up. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and all of this is screen used from the Mummy. Everything? Yeah. All this, that statue, that, the big statue of Horus. They're all right out of the Mummy movies that were made in the 90s, early 2000s. So here's the Mummy sarcophagus, which has just arrived and been opened. So obviously our Mummy performers here. Opposite it is Dracula's coffin. And so this is the first double scare in the haunted house. So Mummy attacks you from this side, Dracula attacks you from this side. I forgot to point out, do you guys see a chest that's sitting up? It's probably not cocked open yet, but it will be, but it's sitting up on top of those crates. I wanted to do something that was similar to the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. I wanted this mysterious open chest that's glowing with this otherworldly like amber light, but in our case we're also making it pulse like a heart with the sound of a heartbeat, so it's dum 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 dum, and that's the Mummy's heart because it's the amulet that's keeping the heart alive. So there's a couple times where you encounter this glowing chest as you go through the haunted house. And then obviously Dracula comes from that side, and then you pass by this very, very large statue of Horus. Wow. Yeah. It's a big boy.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, these have just been, we've had these for like a long time. And,
Where did they shoot those movies? That wasn't something that was like shot here, was it?
Tunisia.
I think it was like Tunisia or something. I don't think I was ever on the set of those particular films because when I started working on The Mummy, well, we opened it in 2004, and the first Mummy movie was '99. So I think I came on board right when they were releasing the second Mummy movie. But I do remember they did film that big model scene here, that opening shot from The Mummy, where it goes through Cairo and it's a pan shot. Those are all models.
That's
that was
part of the
early
special effects
CGI.
show, right?
Yeah, it's part
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they comped live action into the model, but it was at one of those, probably one of the last. Well, I guess these days directors are starting to do models again, but it was this big. I mean, it took up like a whole soundstage. It was crazy. I remember when they shot that. So this is the holding room. This is when they're uncrating everything. And the next room is the storage racks. This is where they're organizing all the goods that are going to get shipped from one place to the other. And we meet the next character. In a lot of this particular house, as far as the Mummy goes, I wanted to look more at the sequels, which is, there's plenty. We did a whole string of Mummy films in the 1940s, Mummy's Hand and the Mummy's Ghost, etc., etc. And in all of those films, there's always these guys called the High Priests of Karnak. And they are like the protectors of the Mummy. And they basically like control him. And they do that in our house with the amulet of Ra and keeping his heart alive. So you're going to run into the High Priest of Karnak as you go around the corner.
Cool room.
Yeah, it's weird. Like of all the rooms, I mean, this Maze's house is,
Is it hard for you to switch the verbiage? Is it really hard?
Yeah, because I've been doing it for, geez, this is my, if you count 2020, it's my 17th year of Horror Nights, but I guess in reality it's my 16th. But
What prompted it? Was it just a corporate thing?
Marketing just wanted to have the same term
Yeah.
used coast to coast, which isn't unreasonable. It's for whatever reason, and none of us can really explain it honestly. Orlando's always referred to their haunted houses as houses because I'm sure that's where it came from. It was like, oh, a haunted house. So they've called them houses since the beginning. We've called them mazes here in Hollywood since the beginning, and predates me. I actually had to look it up. I was like, well, where did this come from? Because I got asked really early on, do you have any angst over this? And I was like, personally, I don't really care. It doesn't really affect me. It's like, it's just gonna have to train my brain to call them something different. but it's more like educating the fans, that you have to do. But I looked back to the very first Horror Nights, which was back in the 80s. We did the very first one. The first Halloween Horror Nights was here in Hollywood, and it was only 1 year. And the first maze they ever did was called Maze of Madness. And I was like, oh, that must be where they got the name from. So, yeah, it's just hard to, retrain your brain. But I'm fine with it. It kind of makes more sense. It's like haunted house. That's what we're doing. So this is a hidden door where the High Priest of Karnak pops out. He's got his big ceremonial Egyptian dagger. And then we take you to the Paymaster's office. Oh, I'm sorry, I was going to say one thing. When we're doing lighting and it's nighttime and I walk through here, the scene that's the most realistic to me and feels like I'm in a real place is this hallway for some reason. It's so weird. It's just, when you turn the corner, especially under show lighting, it just feels like real.
Do you think it's the height?
Well, there's scenes that are just as tall. It's weird. I don't know what it is. It might be just because we're in a scene that's, where it's tall, but it's also compressed. So you feel more like immersed in it, I guess. Yeah. All right. So we come to the Paymaster's office. Yeah.
Stupid question, but do they pump AC in anything there, or is it just too loud? Oh, there we go.
There is AC that's pumped in primarily for the crew that's working during the day, because you put this in a black tent and it's 10 degrees hotter than it is outside.
Yeah.
So it's brutal. And we have fans and stuff, but it's at the end of the day it's a tent and it's open, so it's only so useful.
This is a screen.
Yeah.
Screen.
Yeah. Well, somebody left it on.
This is a
last
black
night.
screen.
Yeah, somebody left it on last night. Just watch your feet, because there's a whole bunch of stuff down by your feet. So this is the Paymaster's office. This is where we introduce the Wolfman. This is going to be Larry Talbot in the chair, mid-transformation. So this is unlike the other characters that are fully transformed, which are a mask. This is a full-blown prosthetic makeup. Takes about 90 minutes to get the performers into makeup, which is an eternity for Horror Nights. In a movie you can do that, but hundreds of actors are getting into makeup every single night. But we pick certain characters. La Llorona is another one. We're doing that all with makeup this year, as opposed to, I think in the past we did like a full face prosthetic.
So how many actors per night would that be?
Well, this one, there's only this one role that has to do this, so it's only two people,
actors.
so it's reasonable. So
Is
we
it-
kind of pick it.
Sorry, is it just like Frankenstein meets the Wolfman? Is that kind of transformation
Yeah,
scene?
it's that kind of look, and he's, all his bones are stretching and popping, and it's the painful, horrible agony of that, and he's screaming and freaking out and looking at his hands. And then that's obviously a display back there, and that's going to be projecting the full moon. We wanted to do a fun thing with the moons in this house. Every time it's a scene featuring the Wolfman, it's a pale blue moon. Every time it's the Mummy, it's a harvest moon, which is kind of a golden amber color. And every time it's Dracula, it's a blood moon. So it's like nature itself is reacting to this curse. It's a good example of what our props and dressing crew does for Horror Nights. The research I did for this, I actually pulled illustrations of Charles Dickens's office in London, Victorian London, and then gave that to him, because I was like, okay, this is an authentic. This is what an office would look like in London, and then they have to go out and source everything, create all these letters and documents, and then make sure everything's attached. So it's a tremendous amount of work. And then when we leave here, we're going to the graveyard. I mentioned, or maybe I didn't, that there's kind of three major sections to this house. There's the warehouse, there's the graveyard, and then there's the museum. Why graveyard? Because for whatever reason, every single Mummy sequel, there's always a graveyard scene. And a lot of that has to do with what they did when they got around to the sequels. We think of our Universal monster films as like these, glorious, which they are, glorious films of the 1930s and 40s. The 30s films had a certain level of production design that was really high. But when they got into the 40s and they started churning out these sequels, they were all B movies. Quite honestly, that's what they were. They had much smaller budgets. You can tell in the Frankenstein films just by looking at the lab. When you look at the lab in Bride of Frankenstein, it's this amazing, gorgeous, huge, tall set they built in stage 12 over there. But by the time you get to like House of Frankenstein, it's like a couple of moving lights and looks like just stuff they found in the prop warehouse. I'm like, here you go, here's your lab. I think the reason that they had graveyards in all these mummy movies is because they always move the action in these sequels to America for some reason. It's like they didn't want to go shoot location photography in Egypt, or they didn't want to have to build Egyptian sets. So they always transplanted the stories like taking place in America, and there was always a graveyard. So we're going to take you out into the graveyard at night. Immediately you get attacked by the Wolfman fully transformed. And that moon is going up high, so we see the blue moon.
Gotta ask, ET or no?
So, you know what? We're down to one.
One?
We have one tree left from the queue line of ET.
You need to tag that.
And everything else.
That thing is iconic.
You know, we actually have a lot from the ride, but it's in the archive. We have a lot of the animatronics and stuff. And those were saved. The speak and spell and all that. We have a few things in our inventory. I think we have the owl from the ET ride, the one that just went.
Yeah.
We have like a couple bunny, I think, or something. That's for some reason we ended up with. This is an Easter egg to the director of Dracula. This is a video effect that's controlled by Dracula. So when you're approaching, it's a loop of bats flying inside this crypt, and then when he hits his trigger, it causes them to coalesce and form the shape of Dracula. He opens his cape, and then when he closes it again, he bursts into a bunch of bats, and then the Dracula live performer attacks you from here. So it's all setting it up as a distraction. This is also a really good example of the work of our greenery department. It does all the foliage, trees, dead vines. Same people have been doing it since the beginning. Scarecrow's like probably the ultimate example of that. If you see that facade and it's literally covered with dead vines and there's like vines going through the house. But this scene's a great example too, because what they're trying to do is create a canopy that we can light. So when you go through here at night, everything, the walls disappear, everything disappears, and you feel like you're out in the woods, you know, or in a cemetery at night. It's pretty amazing. For inspiration for this section, I kind of did research on Highgate Cemetery, which is in London. It was built around this time in Victorian times. And at that time, all of England was on fire about anything Egypt, because they were making those early discoveries in the Valley of the Kings. So Highgate Cemetery actually has a whole Egyptian wing to it. So we wanted to pick up on that. So as you turn the corner, it starts turning into Egyptian architecture. And we're using invisible blacklight paint and UV strobes, which are like back there, to have other additional hieroglyphs and symbols appear. And they're all, I meticulously researched all this stuff like I did for the Mummy ride. If you go through the queue line, every one of those hieroglyphs means something. And it's all bad. It's all, you know, you're going to die and stuff like that. But these are specifically talking about Anubis, which is the god of death. He comes in several times throughout this house until you get to the end. So we're kind of foreshadowing. And you're hearing these freaky, whispering, chanting voices saying, Anubis, Anubis. And this is a secret passageway. You go through this tomb, and that takes you to the museum. So, somebody's paintbrush. It's like at this point in the maze, it's like we're just like, you know, anything that's not in here needs to go away. So the mummy attacks you before you get there, and then you go into total darkness, which is an opportunity to do the classic effect I've been doing since I was 10 years old, which is black industrial thread hanging in the path, feels like cobwebs or something touching your face. It's like super simple, but it's effective. So you're hearing the sound of flies buzzing around, but you're also hearing the Wolfman as if he's in there with you, stalking you, and by the time you get to the end of the section, you get attacked by him again.
I think that's the threads on there.
Ah, yeah, it's just so simple but effective. So Wolfman, and then now we're in the museum. That would be cocked up like that, and you'd see the glowing amber light and dum 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 dum. So this is the curator of the museum's office. Unfortunately, he has been murdered. Once again, you hear Renfield's laughter. He pops out from behind that door, and then big blast of thunder and lightning. Dracula appears in those windows. You can kind of see there's a moon back there. That's his blood moon. And then he opens the window and comes right out onto the desk. And you have Renfield here Dracula here, and then you take one step and then vampire brides come rushing at you. Oh. So you need some WD-40 on that. So there's a performer back there that's controlling the audio lighting and the movement of that. This is our little cameo for the vampire brides from Bride of Frankenstein, or some, yeah, Bride of Frankenstein Lives last year.
That maze was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they moved it.
So this is an example of like all the graphics our graphics department has to make. This has an Easter egg. So obviously all of the stuff that arrived at the dock is all part of an exhibit that's going to be here at this museum. But there is also going to be a short address by S. Hudson on Egyptian music. S. Hudson is Saul Hudson, that's Slash's real name. So Slash from Guns N' Roses, he's doing the entire score for this house, like he's done for every one of our Universal Monster houses. And this is the 5th collaboration between Slash and myself, going back to 2014 when we did Clowns 3D together. So Slash has written a whole new score for this, which you'll experience when you go through it. So pretty cool.
When can we expect the final release of those?
I know, everybody keeps asking me. The way I structured it with Slash is I'm just like, hey, it's your music. You own the music 100%. So it's up to them to decide what they want to do. They released some of it before, but hopefully, yeah. Our fans would love that, that's for
I
sure.
would die.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a cool one too. He did some really cool music for this. He did several different pieces, and he did some really cool Egyptian-inspired music, which is fun. And then from here, we go into the first display room. Which is again, keep showing up, and then. So up here is the High Priest of Karnak that you saw earlier. He is standing over this flaming brazier. This is all special effects. All of this looks like burning embers when it's turned on. There's smoke routed through it. And he's holding the mummy's heart that was in that case in his hand, and he's doing an incantation trying to bring all these mummies back to life, because his end game is he wants to restore the old kingdom. So those are figures that come to life and push out at you. Their eyes glow. They all start glowing when he does his incantation. The heart was funny because it's like, it's hard to find a good heart, like, you know, prop wise, like it's like looks real, because real hearts don't look like the way people think they look. My brother-in-law is a cardiologist in Dublin, so I called him up and I was like, hey, I know you have a 3D printer. Like, do you have any good 3D models of an actual human heart? And he's like, oh yeah, I do. I use it all the time for, you know, he does some teaching and stuff, so he uses it for that. And I'm like, can you send me a good 3D model? You know, and he did. So we made it. We 3D printed it here, and then it has LED technology into it, and it's wireless technology, so that when he's doing this, it pulses with the sound of the mummy's heart. And then our mummy live performer is back here, and he comes to life. So he's trying to raise all these mummies to take over. But you should never mess with Egyptian curses. It's just, you know, you should have learned that from all the mummy movies. It's just not a good idea, you know, and we're going to see why in a second. That's classic props.
That's great. Don't touch it.
Everything on this cart is freshly glued. Please let it set up. Thank you. Props. Yeah. There's nothing, if you want to make prop people angry, touch their stuff. Drives them crazy. Because they have to, everything has to be attached, so they have to go through and screw or glue or whatever, you know, every single thing you see in these houses. It's like a Herculean effort just to do that, let alone source it, install it, etc. So the result, they have to get these, they have this weird thing with tape. They have tape everywhere. No. That's horrible. And a lot. All those weapons are from the mummy movies too. You got all the stunt ones, so they're all made out of rubber foam. I miss those days when they would just give us stuff. They used to do that all the time. The movies would end and they'd be like, "Do you want anything?" And they'd be like, "Yes." That's how we built like half our inventory. It doesn't really happen.
Why is that? Is just more
Because
stuff
there's like
to
a whole
archive?
business for selling them now.
Yeah.
You'll see movie studios sell props and the hero stuff that they want to preserve for all time. That goes to the archive. But then they're left with all this other stuff. And in the old days, they used to just dump it. They used to just destroy it. Put it. When I was a kid, growing up, you know, like visiting this place.
Dumpster dive. Yeah.
Because it would just go in the trash. But not. Oh, yeah.
Your monster.
We're recording. We'll
Yeah.
stop talking about it.
But yeah, it was just, that's the way it was dealt with. But now it's like a whole business. It's like a whole separate business for movie studios to because there's a whole market for people who want to collect that stuff. But so it's really rare if we ever get anything anymore. The most recent example would be us. All of the tethered were all screen used costumes, every one of them. And actually recently, I've known the person who runs our property department since I was probably in my 20s because I've been here so long. And she called me up and she was like, do you have any need for those red jumpsuits from, and we knew we were going to be doing the Nope Us mashup for Tram. And I'm like, oh yeah, what do you got? And she's like, I have 100 units. And I'm like, I'm sending a truck. I'll take every single one of those. And we got all the original Jupiter's Claim. I've tracked down the costume designer on that film with Jordan and his producer's help. She lives in Italy. And I got a hold of her, or had my costume designer get a hold of her, and she knew where all of the wardrobe for the Jupiter's Claim employees were. And there's all these like nondescript warehouses that exist out in the valley that movie studios have that are just like holding places before they decide what they're going to do with these assets. And you wouldn't even know that that's what they are. And I sent her down there, and it's just a buzzer and an intercom. And they're like, go away. And she's like, they won't let me in. And I'm like, oh, God, okay. You know, hey, my person's, you know, and then they let her in, and then we got all the wardrobe from Jupiter's Claim. So what our cast is wearing is all screen used, which is kind of cool. So that was fun. So this is the High Priest of Karnak. This is what the character's going to look like. Hopefully not covered in sawdust. That'll drive props crazy too. They obviously did some modification to this. They're like, no, we have to clean it again. In his hand is going to be the amulet, and it's dying now. The light is starting to fade. The heartbeat's starting to fade. And this is really, you know, you often pull inspiration from movies, even movies that have nothing to do with the movies you're working on. I always love the end of Apocalypse Now with Brando just going, the horror. So I have him going, the curse. You know, he's been murdered. We don't know what killed him, but he's realizing, oh, it was a bad idea to mess with this curse. This is a triple scare. Dracula from there, Mummy from there. The thing that's missing here is a big, huge graphic like that. Again, it'll be stretch panel with a hidden slit. So you get bam, bam, and then when you try to sneak past, the Wolfman busts through the graphic and hits you. And that's the end, but there's one more surprise. So as you exit, you hear all that chanting, voices again, and Anubis's name being spoken. And you get attacked by a stilt-walking werewolf Anubis. So it's like we created our own like universal monster that doesn't exist. And again, it all goes back to that original research where they've decided that he's a wolf man. So all of this leads back to him. He's huge. Like even he doesn't even wear the Anubis head on his face. It's up here, and he's looking through the chest. He's got the amulet, and he's on 2-foot stilts, and he's got those big, huge ears. So he's gonna probably almost touch the ceiling of the next space. But he comes racing out at you from utter darkness. So that's where we go. So this all goes dark, 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 and then I'll hear this horrible growl, and boom, boom, boom. He comes racing out at you from the darkness and gives you one last scare before you leave. And then the last thing you hear is Larry Talbot, which would be me, because I do all the voices in this house, saying, some curses are like the gods themselves, immortal. So, you know, curses last forever. You can't break them.
So nobody wins.
Nobody wins. No.
I like that kind of
Do all
thing.
the voices in this house.
I do, yeah. I do Renfield, I do Dracula, I do the Larry Talbot, which is, I'm a classically trained thespian. I went to school specifically for acting. I had a full ride scholarship, but then I got into writing during college, and I decided I didn't want to do that for a living. So now the only time I ever use that skill is for Horror Nights. So I do a lot of voiceovers. Over the years, I've done everything from Mother Bates and the Psycho, to God,
Sweet Licks.
yeah, Sweet Licks the Clown and Clowns, the Dad in Poltergeist. I've just done probably hundreds of them by this point. And I'm going to do that today. I'll be doing more voiceovers today for some last remaining stuff we got to record. But yeah, it's kind of the nature of Horror Nights. Everybody wears multiple hats. All of us are theater rats. All of us came up from theater, for the core people who do this event. So theater's a great training ground for this stuff because all the disciplines we deal with are all things you deal with in theater: costumes, lighting, props, set design, direction, all of it. So we multitask a lot. So at this stage of the project, I think it was last night, I grabbed my art director, because we're here till the cows come home every single night, and none of us will stop working until it's open. So we'll just, you guys, happy Labor Day, we'll be here, but we all have a lot of knowledge about a lot of different areas. So I was supposed to do lighting tours with my art director last night, going through and looking at focus and all color and all that. And I was like, I need to focus on audio. All right, I'm going to take audio, you take lighting, and then I'm going to deal with the cast at 11 o'clock at night. And then we just kind of divide and conquer. And literally one of my main production designers who works under Chris Williams is number one production designer, named Brandy Creason. I came through here and she was literally hanging curtains, like those curtains, those black ones. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's just like, oh, I'm just helping out props because, they have a lot of work to do. And I'm like, that's cool. Everybody just does that. Like at some point, Chris Williams will be painting something in one of these houses, I guarantee you, because he started as a scenic painter. So he knows what, he'll come in and it's probably going to be the Universal Horror Hotel because we have all these pagan symbols in there and all seeing eye written in blood and stuff. And I know Chris is going to end up painting all that stuff because that's just the way he rolls. So probably there's a tent over there, so we won't be in direct sunlight. So why don't we go outside and we'll... Thank you.
Oh man. At least some of those rooms weren't so bad.
And there's some years, you guys know, some years you come here to do this and it's 100 degrees. But I live in Ireland now, so I'm not used to...
You get rains all the time.
Oh yeah, it got, the high is typically in the summer it gets 70s. It's about as hot as it ever gets. So I'm fully acclimated to European climate now, so I'm just oh.
We have family from Ireland visiting for 3 weeks, and they were just loving every second of being in California sun.
Oh yeah, the Irish take vitamin D constantly because it's just there's not a lot. It's like Seattle, there's not a lot of sun. So when they get in the sun, they go wild, and then they look like lobsters.
That's true.
Hopefully, I don't look like a lobster. But anyway, I'm happy to answer questions you guys have about either house or anything, related to Horror Nights 2022.
I feel like whenever you guys do a Universal Monsters maze or house, yes, sorry.
How dare you?
The fans tend to get really into it and excited.
They do.
So I was wondering if you're
awesome.
Surprised at the current generation's willingness to embrace the classics.
I am so happy about that because that was my greatest fear. In all honesty, I intentionally resisted doing anything with the Universal Monsters, even though it is by far my greatest passion in the world of movies in general. I grew up on those films. I've been a fan of those films for over 50 years. I have a massive collection of Universal Monsters memorabilia in my house. I'm very precious with them. I'm a purist. I don't like anything messing with the traditional classic films. It's just my personal taste. And I just didn't do it. I mean, we did Monsters remixes about as close as we got, but that was a total goof. That was okay, we'll make it a rave. And that wasn't really a serious attempt at taking on these characters. Shortly, when 2018, when we were asked, can you do something with the Universal Monsters? And I was really worried about it. And I remember talking it over with my wife at the time, who knows my obsession with these characters, and she's like, don't do it. It's going to break your heart because it's not going to succeed. She was dead set, these kids, kids today aren't going to be into movies from nearly 100 years. Next year's the 100th anniversary of Hunchback. That's how old these movies are. And that was the worst thing to say to me because then I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it work, and I got on this crazy rampage about we're going to find a way to make this work, but we're going to do it with respect. So the main design mandate from the beginning is I want to start with what's iconic. You know, if it was Frankenstein, it's the flat head and the bolts in the neck and all the things that are iconic about these characters, and then we're going to go back into their stories and we're going to find what's truly horrific, which there is in every case. You know, Dracula lives on human blood. I mean, you know, and we're going to find a way to tease that to the surface so it can visually show in the masks, but still be iconic and still be instantly recognizable. You should be able to look at any of these characters and go, oh, that's Dracula. And find ways to make them relate to a modern day horror audience. Like Dracula is a good example. My analogy for him is he's a meth addict. You know, not literally, but he's addicted to blood. He's addicted. He has to have blood. He's just like an addict. And like addicts show their addiction on their face, particularly meth. If you look closely at our Dracula mask, you'll see all the little veins, you know, have come to the surface in his face. And it's the same way for all of these characters. That's the way we approached them. And 2018 came, and it was the #1 rated thing that we did that year by our fans. And that was just like such a, like, that'll probably, when all is said and done and I'm long gone, that's going to be the thing that I'm the most proud of Horror Nights, is like, wow, you know, somehow we took the Universal monsters and made them relevant to a modern day horror audience. And now they're anticipating it, which is fabulous. So yeah, I'm really pleased that our fan base is obsessed with them, because I want to turn all that generation onto these films and keep them alive, because they're great films. They still hold up. You know, they're different. You know, they're not going to scare anybody the way they did in 1931. But in our world, in our universe, we're definitely carrying that torch. So it's really cool. I'm really pleased. Yeah.
I had a follow-up question to that in terms of the monster universe. So does this kind of take place anywhere near the Bride of Frankenstein lives? Because I know the Drac brides are pretty much annihilated by the bride at the end of that maze. So I'm curious, does this story have any relation to that, or are they completely separate
it's
things?
funny. Like the fan, and this is a fan thing. They're like, you must have planned this all out in advance. and they say, I don't know if we'll ever know the truth about Star Wars. Like, you know, I was 10 when Star Wars came out, so I remember that, you know. But like all the fans were like, there was this multiverse that was all planned. Really? I don't believe it. That movie, nobody thought that movie was going to be a hit. There was no science fiction movies that were hits. That was a real downtime for science fiction before Star Wars came out. It redefined everything. So I take that, I'm very skeptical that this was all master planned. And no, we never master planned. If I master planned this, I wouldn't have torched the Bride of Frankenstein in the second one, because she was burnt to a crisp and she had no arms. You know, she was all in pieces. And then we did the Bride of Frankenstein Lives. So no, there was no multiverse planned. You know, I honestly was just hoping that we'd get to do the one, and then once it succeeded, that's when I went, okay, now where can we go? And that's why we're doing original stories now. We did that for the first time with Bride, and that was really a cool way to extend the Universal Monsters universe with just within the world. Has nothing to do with the films. It's just within the world of this event. But now we can create original stories and do our own iterations, but still approach it with the same respect that we did from the original one. So no, it wasn't planned. No.
In the maze you raised your hand. You can go for it.
That's fine with that.
But the fans think it was, because they like write all these, and this is it. I'm like, well, that's nice, but no.
Yeah, the Drac brides don't have all those burnt crosses and everything on them.
No. It was literally just like, hey, it'd be fun to have the vampire brides pop in here just for a goof, you know. Because it does work with the story, because Dracula, why does he want to be able to go out in sunlight? He wants to create more vampires. He's trying to take over. The mummy or the high priest of Karnak are trying to take over. The Wolfman's the one guy in the mix who just wants to lead a normal life. He's the one. I always felt bad for the Wolfman. Like, even when I was a little kid, like, you know, all of these, for the most part, I think across the board, all of these movies that we made in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and even 50s with creatures kind of like this too, they're all tragedies. They're all sad. You know, that's why I became so attached to them at a young age. I just instantly related with them. I related with the monsters better than I did my contemporaries. You know, I felt bad for them. You know, I felt like they were mistreated, and I think that's why I became so protective of them. You know, is I just thought, like, you know, it's not their fault, you know. And certainly with the Wolfman, I mean, just dumb luck. He's out in the woods, he gets bit by this werewolf, and now he's afflicted. That's kind of, you know, it's Shakespearean stuff. It's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought about, like things like Phantom of the Opera, and you look at a lot of those
Phantom,
classic
it's all about
monsters.
unrequited love, you know. He just wants Christine to love him. He goes about it in a weird stalkery way, you know. But that's his goal. He's just in love, you know. And the Hunchback too. It's a horribly sad story, you know. This, you know, he's in love with Esmeralda, but he's, you know, physically deformed and isn't going to end up as the object of affection. I love that it's not in our film, it's because it was silent, but in the Charles Lawton one, where he's got his arm around the gargoyles, and he's like, why was I not made like these, made of stone, you know? It's all of it's like, it's heartbreaking stuff. But yeah.
In the maze, you had talked about getting costumes for the Jupiter's Claim characters from the film. So for Tram, I know that we're going to have the tethered there.
Yeah.
What characters can we expect to see from Nope on the Tram?
Yeah, it's I should probably explain Tram, because it's kind of hard to explain. There's Tram, which we've always done since 2006, that occupies from where you drop off, which is kind of by the Bates Motel, to War of the Worlds. That is Hollywood Harry's Halloween. So that's the third go around with our original character, Hollywood Harry. And this time he's having a Halloween party, and it taps into all of this stuff. It's all the vintage tropes of Halloween. It's skeletons, sheet ghosts, black cats, vampire bats, jack-o'-lanterns, but then just like the monsters put through our filter and HHNized. And then when you get to the end of War of the Worlds, you continue up the street, up Steven Spielberg Drive, and you literally, I kind of really like the marketing line is taking a dark new twist, because I'm like, that's exactly what it's doing. You're going up the street, it's taking a dark new turn, I think is the word. And then you take a turn and you arrive at Jupiter's Claim. So that's like a whole separate experience. It's not connected to the story of what's going on with Hollywood Harry. The idea is, and it was Jordan's idea, and I was immediately like, yes, great idea, because it's really hard to translate Nope to Horror Nights because it all takes place up in the sky. So what it is the aliens have just attacked the stadium and sucked out all those people. Anyone left behind, which is the Jupiter's Claim employees and those poor reenactors, you know, those cosplay dudes and dressed like bank robbers or, you know, miners, they are left behind, and it's like, oh, thank God, the alien didn't take us. And then the tethered from it's kind of brilliant. It's great because it's like it's mashing up two totally different cinematic universes, which is, you know, kind of in the way. What's the movie? There was Split, and then there was
Unbreakable.
Glass, where Ed Knight matched up his universes. I thought, this is cool. He's mashing up his two cinematic universes. So the tethered at the end of Us, that last shot is that big, huge aerial shot where you just see them hands across America, stretching across America. So eventually they get to the desert, you know, which is, I was on the set of Nope, last summer. And they filmed that up by Magic Mountain. It was out, you had to drive forever. It was in the middle of the desert. And so they eventually got there. They got to Jupiter's Claim, and then they do what the tethered does. They start killing everybody. So you've arrived right when that's happening is the idea.
That's fun.
So it's fun. But they are very separate. They're just thematically totally different experiences. You're just using the same conveyance system to get to them. So it's kind of like the train at Disneyland. You know, it's like, you know, we'll drop you off here, you can see this, and now we're going to let you experience this. But it's a whole new thing. So it's a major enhancement to Tram. Yeah.
So we're going to be able to walk through Jupiter's Claim?
Yeah, I'm going to be out there tomorrow night, 9 o'clock, with Jordan's producer, with Jordan's choreographer, which is also really exciting. There's a woman named Madeline Hollander, and she did all the blocking for the movie Us. So all that crazy like balletic moves that Lupita and all the other characters did, she's Jordan's like body movement specialist choreographer, and so we worked with her on Us. She actually blocked that entire house. I came through and said, "Here's what I've got going. Go to town," you know, because I knew that she's the expert on that. She created it. So I'm doing the same thing with her Saturday night. We're meeting out on the back lot at 9 o'clock at night. because we're waiting for the trams. We don't want to be like tram, it's like kids playing, football in the street or something, or stickball or something. Because that's what it's like. You're out there and you're like tram, and you have to leave. So we're all getting together. I've like laid it out, but I've laid it out very loosely because I know she's going to take it and bring what she brings to it, and then she's going to be working with all our performers. We'll be doing off-site, just work on tethered choreography, and then we'll come on site for our day with the cast again on site, and then we'll do it all. But she's going to block it all, which is really cool. It's pretty rare to have the person who did the film actually directing your talent, which I think for the cast is really exciting. So it'll be awesome.
Can you tell me?
Yeah.
Did you find that so the backlot stuff that used to be part of Horror Nights and was kind of replaced by Curious George last year?
Oh, you mean Metro Set?
Yeah. Is there a reason that's
Yeah.
stopped?
I think the pandemic has a lot to do with it because, this place was all shut down.
Yeah.
Not only us, but the movies were shut down. That's why, Top Gun comes out, 2 years after it was supposed to? Same kind of thing. Whole huge backlog in production. If you drive around the movie studio, I know because I do it like every single day. I was driving by 6 Points and it's just covered in dirt and there's a huge crew in there. And then I turn a corner and there's a crew in Colonial Street or Wisteria, and there's just production. And I don't know if you've noticed, but we're ripping the studio apart and building all these new sound stages out by Barmgate Transportation. Massive new sound stages. So
Those were fast.
Yeah. And which is cool. Production seems to be like, with the things the government has done, there's a lot more production in LA than there was in the past. And there's a lot more production on our lot. So it's just a case of all these people wanting to film. And that's been the whole history of my time with Horror Nights. It's find a location, lose a location, find another location. When T2 was there, we built those Rob Zombie's House of 1,000 Corpses, Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, and then that turns into Despicable Me. Can't build a haunted house in Despicable Me. It just doesn't jive, Shrek, we had haunted houses. We used to have when I first started, we had the whole western, area where we built houses and streets. So that's the other challenge, is as Harry Potter came online and Illumination with Despicable Me and Pets, places where I could do scare zones are just not practical anymore, or are gone, fully gone. So another new thing we're doing this year to try to touch more areas of the park with Horror Nights. That's kind of the goal, is like, okay, we have 3 main scare zones. Well, what can we do to immerse you in the event in those places in between? So we came up with this new thing this year. I just call them like character encounters or character interactions. So we tried to find different areas of the park where we could have at least one, sometimes much more than that, characters. So an example would be, if you know where our Animal Actors show is, that's now called the Haunted Forest, that courtyard where you wait before you go inside, because that's one of the oldest parts of the theme park that's still untouched from when it was first built. And those trees are huge and beautiful and mature. So we're lighting all that up. We've got decor and set pieces, and there's 2 different forest demon characters hiding in that zone. And why I did that is because the bathrooms are back there. So everybody's going to have to use those bathrooms. They're going to have to go through there to get to the bathrooms, which is kind of evil and fun. But then we're adding where the Hollywood sign photo op is at the end of Terror Tram. Hollywood Harry's going to be there. And our fans want to take pictures with our characters. I know this because I see it every night, and I don't allow it. I just full stop don't allow it. And it's because what happens if I stop and take a picture with a guest, a line instantly forms. And then they're no longer doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is scaring you, and they're just posing for pictures. But over the years, I've kind of softened to that desire, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to create designated areas where you can do that. So in the Universal Plaza, you can take a picture with La Katrina. She's another character that's in that area. At the end of Terror Tram, you can take a picture with Hollywood Harry. You'll probably get a nasty surprise if you do it, but you can do that. Death Eaters, which I think we rehearsed last night. In Harry Potter, we're adding the Death Eaters, which we've never done before. And that's not 2 characters, that's a whole bunch. And then we're doing, some things are total R&D. Our makeup artist made a video on his own, made a costume on his own, like a temp one, almost like how they did, if you've ever seen how they did the Queen Alien with trash bags and stuff when they were like trying to sell the idea to James Cameron. Same kind of thing. He created this stilt-walking crow character out of like trash bags and stuff. And we got one of our Stilt-walkers, and it did it as a stalk around, which means the performer's looking out the chest, the head's way up here. It's all rigged so it moves with the performer's head. He can open and close the mouth. The hands are almost like rod puppets, so he can control the claws to open and close. And he's huge. He's at least as tall as that. And we're just going to test him. We're just going to run him around the top deck and see what works. So we're trying a lot of those types of things just to touch different areas of the park. So there's probably 5 of those throughout the park that you can encounter.
Can you tell me a little bit?
Sure.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how Universal Monsters bridges with the same house in Orlando?
Yeah.
If you've ever done that before.
No, we've never done that before. We're getting a lot more collaborative in recent years because what we try to do purely from a marketing standpoint is try to align on the main intellectual properties that we're going to feature in marketing so that marketing doesn't have to create, well, here's the Hollywood poster. It's just efficiency. Here's the Hollywood poster. Here's the Orlando poster. Here's a press release for Hollywood. So we were asked, can you guys get together and align so that we can keep the key art and the press releases the same? And our content's often very different. So what we did is we all got together and we brainstormed, and like I was saying, we didn't agree. You know, it was like, we want to do Egypt, we want to do London. It's like that old peanut butter, Reese's Pieces. We could do chocolate and peanut butter. So then, as we kind of were talking and working it out, I said, you know what? Why don't we just come up with an overarching story that's connected, and then we can, and why don't we write? Well, let's write a press release. We'll give it. They're going to, write it themselves, but we're going to write one and give it to the publicity department, and then they can take it and do what they need to do with it. So we tried to write almost like a movie pitch, like let's write an overarching, paragraph that describes this whole thing, and then we can branch off and do our own thing. And that meant we needed a line on the amulets. The amulet's the same coast to coast, but they're totally different experiences. We did the same thing with the Weekend Haunted House. We sat down, because he came with a preconceived idea of what he wanted it to be about after hours. He had a vision of what he wanted to do. So we worked together to collaborate on that. So that one's probably more similar than anything we've ever done before together. And we did the same with Blumhouse. Anything that was going to work its way into marketing, we align on. And we'll do, in a few weeks, we'll be doing the same thing for 23. I'll start 23. I've been working on it since March, but I'll start writing it about 2 weeks after Horror Nights opens. So we'll be sitting down and here we go. Let's do it again. So, yeah.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Thanks a lot,
Thanks
John.
for coming out. We appreciate it.